At exactly 9:17 at night, in a ballroom filled with 300 wealthy strangers, 6-year-old Samuel Frost let go of his mother's hand. For 2 years, he had barely spoken, not to therapists, not to tutors, not to the doctors his billionaire mother had flown in from 3 countries, not even to Adeline Frost, the most powerful woman in the room, and the only person alive who still remembered the exact sound of his old laugh. But that night, after Adeline stood beneath the chandeliers and repeated the sentence every ambitious man in Manhattan had been waiting to exploit, Sam finally moved. "I will only marry again," Adeline said, her voice steady, "if my son chooses the man himself." The room smiled. Some people thought it was elegant. Some thought it was tragic. Victor Hale thought it was an opening, because everyone knew the truth behind the promise. Sam did not speak. Sam did not choose. Sam did not let anyone close enough to be chosen. So when the little boy released his mother's fingers and walked down from the stage alone, the applause died before anyone understood why. He passed Victor Hale, who had spent months sending imported toys and handwritten notes he had never meant. He passed board members who had whispered that Adeline needed a man beside her. He passed investors who saw a grieving child not as a person, but as the only locked door between them and the Frost fortune. Then Sam crossed the entire ballroom and stopped near the service doors, in front of a man no one important had noticed. A school bus driver in a rented black suit. A single father named Theo Marsh. Sam reached up and took his hand. The silence became so deep that the champagne glasses seemed loud. And then, for the first time in almost 2 years, Samuel Frost spoke where everyone could hear him. "This is my friend," he said. "He sees the dog with me." Adeline Frost covered her mouth with both hands. Victor Hale went still. And the entire room understood, too late, that the child they had tried to win had been watching all of them. But what happened next was the part no one forgot. Because Theo Marsh could have smiled. He could have accepted the applause. He could have allowed the richest room in the city to turn a traumatized boy's first public words into a fairy tale about a billionaire chief executive officer and the humble single dad her son had chosen. Instead, Theo bent down until he was eye level with Sam. He held the boy's hand gently, like it was something fragile and sacred, not something he had won. "Sam," he said softly, "that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Thank you for telling them we're friends, because we are, and we will always be friends." Then Theo stood. He looked at the donors, the directors, the old money wives, the investors, and the men who had been circling Adeline Frost like wolves in tailored tuxedos. And he said the sentence that ended Victor Hale's evening before it truly began. "Your son did not choose a husband for his mother tonight. He chose a friend for himself, and I will not let anyone in this room turn the bravest thing he has ever done into a shortcut to his mother's money." No one clapped after that. Not at first. Because in a room built on polished lies, someone had finally said the ugly thing out loud. But to understand why Sam crossed that ballroom, you have to go back to the silence that came before it. Samuel Frost had not always been silent. Before the accident, he was a bright, talkative little boy who named clouds, questioned elevators, and corrected adults when they called construction cranes machines instead of sky giraffes. His father, Nolan Frost, used to say Sam had inherited Adeline's eyes and his own inability to leave a quiet room alone. Then Nolan died on a rainy October night when a private car lost control on the West Side Highway. There was no scandal, no warning, no final goodbye dramatic enough to make grief feel meaningful. Only rain, glass, sirens, and one phone call at 1:42 in the morning that turned Adeline Frost from a wife into a widow before sunrise. At the hospital, Sam spoke once. He asked, "Is Daddy cold?" Adeline had no answer. After that, his voice vanished. The doctors called it selective mutism caused by trauma. They explained it gently, clinically, almost beautifully. His brain was protecting him. His silence was not defiance. Recovery could not be forced. Adeline listened. She paid. She obeyed every recommendation: therapists, specialists, private tutors, gentle routines, communication cards, art therapy, play therapy, the best professionals money could reach. Nothing brought his voice back. And for a woman who could move markets with one sentence, that helplessness became the cruelest kind of poverty. At Frost Meridian Group, Adeline was considered unshakable. She ran a multinational investment and infrastructure empire with the calm precision of someone who had learned early that powerful men only respected women who never looked surprised. Her employees knew her as disciplined, elegant, and almost impossible to manipulate. Her board knew she read footnotes. Her rivals knew she remembered insults. But at home, in the white limestone townhouse on East 73rd Street, she became something quieter. A mother sitting outside her son's bedroom door at night, listening for a voice that no longer came. A woman keeping old videos on her phone and watching them with the volume low enough that Sam would not hear. A widow who sometimes stood in her late husband's closet and pressed her face into a jacket that no longer smelled like him. People saw the billionaire. Very few saw the exhaustion. Victor Hale saw both, and he calculated accordingly. Victor was not foolish enough to appear desperate. Desperate men frightened women like Adeline. Victor knew better. He was charming in the old, expensive way. Tall, composed, silver at the temples before it looked like aging, and always dressed as if he had just stepped out of a private banking lounge in Geneva. He had built his fortune in strategic capital advisory, which meant he was close enough to money to speak its language, but not always close enough to control it. Frost Meridian was different. It owned ports, data centers, clean energy corridors, logistics networks, and private infrastructure contracts in markets Victor had spent 10 years trying to enter. The Frost Family Foundation was different too. Its education programs gave access to mayors, ministers, school networks, philanthropic boards, and the kind of public virtue that made private power easier to defend. Adeline did not just have money, she had legitimacy. And legitimacy was the one thing Victor Hale had never been able to buy outright. He first approached her at a donor breakfast 8 months after Nolan's death. He was respectful, almost too respectful. He mentioned Nolan once, with a careful pause, then moved on before grief could become indecent. "I admired your husband's work," Victor said. Adeline looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. "You never worked with Nolan." "No," Victor replied smoothly. "But men like that leave architecture behind. You can understand someone by what still stands after them." It was a good line. Too good. Adeline remembered it because she had spent her life listening for rehearsed sincerity. Victor did not press that day. That was his gift. He understood that proximity was more valuable than speed. He joined foundation committees. He sponsored scholarship tables. He sent appropriate condolences on difficult dates. He asked about Sam only when others were present, always with that mild, paternal sadness that made older donors soften toward him. When cameras appeared, Victor became tender. When cameras disappeared, he became efficient. "What does the boy respond to?" he asked one of Adeline's assistants after a foundation luncheon. The assistant hesitated. "Mr. Frost doesn't really respond to people he doesn't know." Victor smiled as if that were a solvable logistical issue. "Children respond to consistency. Find out what he likes." It was the beginning of the campaign. First came a limited edition electric train set from Switzerland. Sam did not touch it. Then a handcrafted wooden castle from Prague. Sam looked at it once, then went back to drawing circles on the corner of a notepad. Then came books, puzzles, a telescope, a miniature grand piano, a robotic dog that barked in 3 languages, and a golden retriever puppy from a breeder in Connecticut. Adeline refused the puppy immediately. "You sent a living animal to my home without asking me?" Victor's expression softened into wounded innocence. "I thought it might help him." "No," Adeline said. "You thought it might help you." For 1 second, the mask moved. Only one. Then Victor recovered. "I'm sorry you see it that way. I see it clearly." That should have ended it, but Victor had already learned something important. Adeline might reject him directly, but her circle would not. Her aunt, Celeste Ward, considered Victor civilized. The board chair, Graham Whitlock, considered him strategically useful. Several trustees of the Frost Family Foundation considered him the kind of man who understood responsibility. And almost all of them believed Adeline had become too emotionally sealed after Nolan's death. Not weak, never weak, but unreachable. That made people nervous. Powerful families tolerate grief only for a season. After that, they begin calling it instability. So, during a foundation strategy meeting at Frost Meridian headquarters, with 22 trustees around a glass table and the skyline burning gold behind them, Graham Whitlock finally said what others had been arranging their faces around for months. Adeline, no one wishes to intrude on private matters. Adeline looked up from the grant allocation packet. Then don't. A few trustees shifted. Graham smiled carefully. What I mean is, the foundation has always been tied to the Frost family's public image. Nolan understood that. You understand it. Continuity matters. Continuity of the foundation or continuity of my marital status? No one answered. Victor, seated 3 chairs down as a guest advisor, lowered his gaze in a performance of restraint. Adeline saw it. She also saw Celeste watching her with that old family concern that was never quite concern and never quite strategy. Sam needs stability, Celeste said gently. Adeline closed the folder in front of her. My son is not unstable. No one said he was. You implied my widowhood is damaging him. Victor leaned forward then, voice low and polished. I think what Celeste means is that children sometimes need a model of safety, a father figure, perhaps, someone patient enough to earn trust. The room warmed toward him. Adeline felt it happen. That was Victor's talent. He could say an invasive thing in a tone that made objection seem cruel. For 2 seconds, she imagined standing, ending the meeting, removing every person at that table who thought her son was a governance problem. But Adeline Frost had not survived corporate warfare by giving enemies visible emotion before she understood the battlefield. So, she smiled, not warmly, precisely. If my private life has become a matter of institutional concern, let me settle it clearly. Victor stilled. Graham's eyes narrowed. Adeline placed both hands on the table. I will only consider marrying again if Samuel chooses the man himself. The room went silent. Celeste blinked. Victor's mouth parted slightly, then closed. Adeline continued. My son's comfort will matter more than the board's optics, more than donor gossip, and more than any man's ambition. If Sam ever chooses someone, I will listen. Until then, this subject is closed. Everyone understood the cruelty of the condition. Sam did not choose anyone. Sam barely acknowledged most adults. The promise was not an invitation. It was a locked gate made of maternal grief. Adeline thought it would protect them. She underestimated how many men see a locked gate and call it a challenge. Victor changed strategy within 48 hours. He stopped pursuing Adeline in obvious ways and began staging kindness for Sam. At the school's Winter Art Showcase, he arrived with a donation check large enough to make the head of school smile too widely. He stood near Adeline and waited until Sam came out with his class. Samuel, Victor said, bending down just enough to look tender without wrinkling his tuxedo trousers. I heard you like astronomy. Sam looked through him. Victor held out a small velvet box. Inside was a meteorite fragment mounted in silver. Older than Earth, Victor said. A real treasure. Sam did not move. Adeline watched her son's hand curl into the sleeve of his own jacket. He doesn't like being handed things by strangers, she said. Victor's smile stayed in place. Of course. But the photographers had already caught the image. Victor Hale kneeling before the silent Frost boy, offering a star. By morning, a society newsletter described him as a longtime family friend whose gentleness with young Samuel Frost had not gone unnoticed. Adeline read the sentence twice. Then she called her communications director. Find out who placed this. Adeline, find out. The name came back by lunch. A public relations consultant who had worked with Victor twice before. That was the first time Adeline began keeping a private file. Not because she was afraid of Victor, because she was tired of people confusing her grief with blindness. But none of that explained why Sam would cross a ballroom full of billionaires to take a bus driver's hand. The answer was on Route 14. Theo Marsh was a school bus driver, a single father, and the kind of man who measured his day by whether he got home in time to hear his daughter Lily talk about school. He was 39, lived in a modest apartment above a closed bakery in Queens, and had learned to build his life around small duties no one applauded. Lunches packed before sunrise, hair brushed twice because Lily hated knots, rent paid on time, school form signed at the kitchen counter, coffee reheated 3 times before he ever finished a cup. He did not look like the kind of man a billionaire widow's son would choose in front of 300 people. That was exactly why no one saw him coming. Theo had been a single father since Lily was 3. Her mother, Mara, had not disappeared dramatically. There had been no courtroom war, no public betrayal, no terrible villainy. She simply discovered, slowly and then all at once, that motherhood and marriage made her feel trapped in a life she did not want. Theo had hated her for leaving. Then he hated himself for hating her. Then he learned that hatred consumed energy he needed for breakfasts, laundry, rent, dentist appointments, and the nightly miracle of making a child feel chosen, even when one parent had chosen distance. So Theo built a life out of routines. Breakfast at 6:10, Lily's hair at 6:34, shoes by the door, backpack checked twice because Lily had a poet's mind and no respect for permission slips. Bus depot by 6:58, first pickup at 7:21. He drove children from some of the wealthiest homes in the city and some ordinary apartments sitting just outside the invisible borders wealthy parents preferred not to mention. Theo knew children in ways their parents often did not. He knew which ones were hungry by how they looked at another child's granola bar. He knew which ones had been yelled at before school by the careful way they closed the bus door. He knew which ones were overpraised, undertouched, ignored, indulged, frightened, lonely, and loved. Then there was Sam Frost. 3rd row, right side, window seat, every morning, always in a navy coat, always carrying a backpack that looked too large for his narrow shoulders, always climbing the steps with a seriousness that made Theo's chest tighten if he looked at it too long. The first time Sam boarded, the private school aide whispered, "He doesn't speak much." Theo nodded once. He did not ask why. Children hated being introduced by their wounds. So he looked at Sam and said the same thing he said to every child. "Morning, Sam. Good to see you." Sam walked past him without answering. That afternoon, when the children boarded to go home, Theo looked in the mirror as Sam climbed the steps. "There he is. Climb aboard, partner." A few boys laughed at the word partner. Sam did not, but he looked at Theo for half a second longer than usual. Theo counted that as a conversation. Weeks passed. Sam remained silent, but Theo learned the grammar of him. He learned that Sam disliked sudden braking, so he took the corners softer when traffic allowed. He learned that Sam pressed his thumb into his palm when the bus got too loud, so Theo would lower his voice instead of raising it. He learned that Sam always looked left at the corner of Maple Street. At first, Theo thought it was a house, a large brick home with green shutters, slightly overgrown hedges, and a bright red mailbox shaped like a barn. Then one rainy Tuesday, the reason came running across the yard. A golden retriever. Big, foolish, delighted by the existence of the bus. The dog bounded toward the fence with a tennis ball in its mouth and a tail moving like windshield wipers. For the first time in weeks, Sam's face changed. Not a smile, not exactly, but something inside him turned toward the world. Theo saw it in the mirror. The next morning, he eased off the accelerator near Maple Street. Only a little, just enough. The golden retriever appeared again, paws on the fence, tongue out, hopeful and ridiculous. Sam watched until the bus moved on. Theo said nothing. The day after that, he slowed again, then again. Every day Maple Street was clear enough to do it safely. Theo gave Sam 3 extra seconds with the dog. He never announced it. Never said, "Look, Sam." Never asked, "Do you like dogs?" never turned kindness into a demand. Children can feel when adults use goodness as a hook. Theo simply slowed the bus, and in the third row, by the window, Sam began to wait for Maple Street. One afternoon in March, the golden retriever was not there. Sam stared at the empty fence. Theo saw his shoulders drop. At the next stop, while 3 children got off arguing about a science project, Theo glanced back. "Maybe he's inside today," he said casually. "Rain's coming." Sam looked at him. A real look. Theo kept his voice easy. Good dogs take weather seriously. No response. But the next day, when the retriever returned, Sam's hand lifted from his lap and pointed toward the window. Small, almost invisible. Theo nodded. "Yeah, good dog, huh? I look for him every day, same as you." Sam turned back to the window, but this time he did not look alone. That became their language. A nod when the dog appeared, a slight shrug when he didn't. A quiet, "There he is," from Theo, sometimes meant for Sam, sometimes meant for himself. Theo did not know Sam's last name. Private school rosters used first names for drivers unless medical or pickup information required more. Theo knew Samuel F. He knew the stop. He knew the authorized nanny, Pilar Reyes, who waited every afternoon with kind eyes and a coat that had seen too many winters. He knew the boy came from money because the house had security cameras discreet enough to be expensive. But he did not know Samuel F. was Samuel Frost. He did not know about Adeline. He did not know about the promise. And because he did not know, he could not perform. That was what made him safe. Pilar noticed before anyone else. She had worked for the Frost family since Sam was 2. She had known him when he poured cereal into his toy dump trucks and called it breakfast construction. She had watched him become silent after Nolan's death. She had sat with Adeline on nights when neither of them knew how to help him. So when Sam came home one Thursday and drew a yellow dog beside a blue bus, Pilar felt her throat close. "Is this from your ride?" she asked softly. Sam did not answer, but he tapped the dog twice. Pilar mentioned it to Adeline that night. Adeline was at the kitchen island with 3 open folders, a half-finished espresso, and the posture of a woman pretending not to be tired. "He drew something from the bus route," Pilar said. Adeline looked up immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing bad. A dog, I think, on Maple Street. He seemed interested." Adeline reached for the drawing. The bus was blocky. The dog was almost the same size as the house. In the front seat, a figure with broad shoulders had been drawn behind a steering wheel. There was no face, but there was a cap. Adeline stared at it longer than she meant to. "Did the driver say anything to him?" "I don't know." "Find out who it is." Pilar hesitated. "Mrs. Frost." Adeline's eyes lifted. Pilar chose her words carefully. Sometimes knowing too much makes adults interfere too quickly. The sentence landed because it was true. Adeline wanted to call the school, request the driver's file, interview the man, understand the route, control the variable. That was who she had become after Nolan. A woman trying to prevent life from happening unexpectedly ever again. But Sam had drawn something, not because an adult asked him to, not because a therapist prompted expression, because something had reached him quietly. So Adeline folded the paper once and placed it in the drawer where she kept Sam's old birthday cards. "Don't interfere yet," she said. Pilar nodded, but the warning had already entered the house. Something was changing, and people like Victor Hale could feel change before they understood it. The Frost Children's Education Gala had been planned for 9 months. It was supposed to announce the Foundation's largest initiative in a decade, a national early learning program for children recovering from grief, displacement, and family trauma. Adeline had approved the program because she understood what trauma did to children with resources, and she understood, with an anger she rarely admitted, what it must do to children without them. The gala would raise $40 million. It would place Frost Meridian's name beside public virtue. It would bring together donors, policy leaders, school executives, investment partners, and enough society journalists to make discretion impossible. Victor saw the event as a stage. 3 weeks before the gala, he requested a private meeting with Graham Whitlock. They met at a members-only club where men used low voices to make greed sound like stewardship. Adeline is stretched too thin, Graham said. Victor swirled his drink once. She is grieving. Grief does not exempt leadership from optics. No, Victor agreed. But pressure has to look like concern. Graham studied him. You believe you can help stabilize the public narrative? I believe the foundation needs continuity. I believe Sam needs consistency. And I believe Adeline needs someone who understands how to protect both without appearing to manage her. Graham almost smiled. Careful, Victor. She hates being managed. All powerful people do, Victor said. The trick is letting them think protection was their idea. Graham did not object. That was his mistake. Because Adeline had already asked her legal office to quietly monitor Foundation governance after the planted society item. Not record private conversations illegally. Adeline did not need illegal methods. Power leaves, administrative trails, meeting requests, donor memos, draft talking points, advisory proposals, board agenda revisions. 2 days after Victor met Graham, Adeline received a revised gala program from the Foundation office. Buried near the end was a new segment titled Remarks on Family Continuity and the Future of Frost Philanthropy. She read it once, then again. Victor Hale was listed as a featured speaker. Adeline called the Foundation's executive director. Who approved Victor's remarks? There was a pause. Mr. Whitlock suggested. I asked who approved them. Graham did. He said you were aware. I was not. Another pause. Adeline's voice cooled. Remove the segment. Adeline, the program has already gone to print. Then print it again. After she hung up, she sat very still. This was no longer courtship. It was positioning. Victor was not trying to become a man in her life. He was trying to become inevitable. That evening, Adeline found Sam in the library, sitting under Nolan's old desk, lining up colored pencils from shortest to longest. She sat on the floor a few feet away, still in her silk blouse and tailored trousers. I have to go to the gala next week, she said softly. There will be a lot of people. Sam moved a blue pencil into place. You don't have to speak to anyone. No reaction. You don't have to smile. His fingers paused. You don't have to make anyone comfortable. Sam looked up. Adeline swallowed the ache that rose in her throat. That is my job, she whispered. Not yours. For a moment, his eyes stayed on hers. Then he reached for the yellow pencil. And when he reached for yellow, Adeline thought of the dog in the drawing. She still did not know that the answer to the gala was not in a donor file, a boardroom, or Victor Hale's private ambition. It was waiting at the back of the ballroom, near the service doors. The gala night arrived in black cars, white flowers, camera flashes, and the kind of expensive lighting designed to make wealth look moral. The ballroom of the Harlow House Hotel had been transformed into a cathedral of generosity. Tall arrangements of ivory roses lined the entrance. Gold lettering announced the Frost Children's Education Initiative. Screens played silent footage of classrooms, libraries, art rooms, children laughing over open books. Adeline hated that footage and needed it. She hated using children's faces to raise money. She also knew money moved faster when powerful people felt briefly innocent. She arrived with Sam at 7:12. He wore a small navy suit and held her hand with 2 fingers, his usual compromise between attachment and independence. Pilar walked behind them. Celeste waited near the entrance. You look beautiful, Celeste said. Adeline kissed her cheek. You look worried. I am worried. About me or about the donors? Celeste's mouth tightened. Those are not always separate concerns. Adeline looked toward the ballroom. Victor was already inside, speaking with Graham and 2 trustees from the education committee. He turned at exactly the right moment, as if he had sensed her arrival through architecture. He smiled, not broadly, possessively. Adeline felt Sam's fingers stiffen. Victor had begun walking toward them. In his hand was a narrow box wrapped in silver paper. No, Adeline said under her breath. Pilar saw it too. Victor reached them with an expression crafted for witnesses. Adeline, he said. Samuel. Sam stepped half behind his mother. Victor lowered himself to one knee. Around them, conversation softened. A photographer turned. Adeline saw the trap. If she stopped him publicly, she looked cold. If she allowed it, he obtained the image. Victor held out the box. "I saw this and thought of you, Samuel." Sam stared at the floor. Adeline's voice was quiet. "Victor, stand up." He kept smiling. "It's only a small gift." "I said stand up." Now people were watching. Victor rose slowly, managing to look patient with her. "Of course." Adeline took the box from his hand without giving it to Sam. "Children are not press opportunities." Victor's eyes flickered. Only those close enough saw it. Celeste inhaled sharply. Graham appeared within seconds, diplomatic and displeased. "Everything all right?" "Perfectly," Adeline said. Victor was just remembering the difference between a child and a campaign. Victor's smile remained, but color touched his neck. "That was never my intention." "No," Adeline said. "It rarely is when there are photographers." The first crack in the evening opened there, small, elegant, but visible. Victor spent the next hour repairing it. He laughed at the right tables. He praised the initiative. He told a senator that Adeline's vision understood grief as an educational barrier rather than a private weakness. It was intelligent. It was even true. That made it more dangerous. Predators are most effective when they speak partly in truth. Theo Marsh arrived through the West Service entrance at 7:43. He almost turned around twice. The school had entered staff names into a lottery for community representatives at the gala, and Theo's had been chosen. Margaret Ellis, the head of school, told him it would be good for donors to see the wider ecosystem of people supporting children's education. Theo told her donors usually did not want to see the ecosystem, unless it came with a wine pairing. Margaret laughed. Then she handed him the invitation anyway. His suit was rented from a shop that had pinned the sleeves too aggressively. His shoes were polished, but old. Lily had stood in the apartment doorway before he left and declared him almost fancy. "Almost?" Theo asked. "You still look like you know how to fix a sink." "Good, that's useful." Lily hugged him hard. "Bring me something rich people don't eat." "That is a strange request. Rich people food is tiny. Bring tiny cake." So Theo came for the tiny cake. He did not expect to know anyone. He certainly did not expect the quiet boy from the third row to be standing near the main stage, holding the hand of the woman whose face appeared on the evening program. Theo saw Sam before he understood anything else. The boy looked smaller in the ballroom, not physically, but socially, swallowed by tuxedos and diamonds and adults bending toward him with smiles too bright to be kind. Theo's first instinct was to go over. His second, wiser instinct was not to intrude. Children like Sam survived crowded rooms by knowing exits, so Theo stayed near the back, beside the service doors, where he could see the room without becoming part of it. Sam saw him 12 minutes later. Theo knew the exact moment because Sam's face changed the way it changed on Maple Street. A small orientation, a turn toward safety. Theo gave him the faintest nod. Not a wave, not a signal that demanded a response. Just recognition. Sam's shoulders lowered. Across the room, Adeline noticed. She followed her son's gaze and saw a man near the service entrance. Broad shoulders, rented suit, uncertain posture, kind eyes from a distance. Not a donor, not a trustee, not anyone trying to reach her. "Pilar," Adeline said quietly. "Who is that man?" Pilar looked, then her expression softened. "I think that's Mr. Marsh." "Who?" "The bus driver." Adeline looked back at him. The man was speaking to no one. He stood with a glass of water in one hand, doing his best to disappear. "The bus driver," Adeline repeated. "Yes." Adeline thought of the drawing in the drawer, the yellow dog, the blue bus, the faceless man with the cap. Before she could ask anything else, Graham appeared at her side. "We need you near the stage in 5 minutes." "Why?" His expression was too neutral. "The donors are expecting remarks." "I'm giving remarks. Victor will introduce the continuity pledge." Adeline turned slowly. "I removed that segment." Graham sighed, as if she were being difficult in a way that saddened him. "Adeline, Several major donors have already been briefed. It would look strange to omit it now. Then let it look strange. Your resistance is becoming the story. There it was, the threat dressed as advice. Adeline glanced at Victor across the room. He was watching her without seeming to watch. She understood then. They wanted her on stage. They wanted the promise repeated publicly. They wanted Victor positioned nearby when she said it. Not because they believed Sam would choose him that night, because they believed repetition would turn her private boundary into a public spectacle they could later pressure, interpret, and exploit. Adeline's jaw tightened. Graham lowered his voice. You cannot lead a family foundation while appearing hostile to the concept of family. For a second, the noise of the room fell away. Adeline thought of Nolan, of Sam asking if Daddy was cold, of 2 years of watching adults treat her son's silence as a problem to solve, a tragedy to pity, or a door to power. Then she did something Graham did not expect. She smiled. Call me up, Graham blinked. Adeline, call me up, she repeated. But understand something before you do. I know exactly what this is. His face changed slightly. She walked away before he could answer. At 9:05, the lights dimmed. 300 wealthy people turned toward the stage, relieved to have generosity organized into a program. Margaret Ellis spoke first. She thanked the foundation, the donors, the educators, the staff. She mentioned grief, learning, resilience, and the sacred duty adults have to protect children without making them perform healing for adult comfort. Adeline watched her from the side of the stage. That sentence stayed with her. Protect children without making them perform healing. Victor stood at the opposite side, ready for his moment. Sam held Adeline's hand. His palm was damp. You can stand with Pilar, Adeline whispered. Sam shook his head once. Adeline's heart clenched. You're sure? He squeezed her finger, so she brought him onto the stage. The applause was polite at first, then warmer. Adeline Frost, widow, chief executive officer, mother, philanthropist, appearing with the Silent Sun Society, had turned into a symbol. She hated them for loving the image. She needed them for the initiative. Power was often the art of swallowing disgust long enough to fund what mattered. She stepped to the microphone. Thank you for being here tonight. Her voice carried, clear, controlled, expensive in its restraint. This initiative began with a simple question. What happens to a child's education when grief enters the room before the teacher does? The ballroom quieted. She spoke of children who lose parents, homes, language, stability, safety. She spoke of schools as the first institutions where trauma is either recognized or punished. She spoke of funding counselors, training teachers, supporting families, and building classrooms where silence was not mistaken for emptiness. Theo, at the back of the room, lowered his eyes. He knew some version of every child she described. Then Adeline paused. Some of you have asked me, privately and not so privately, about the future of my family. The air changed. Victor straightened. Graham looked relieved. Adeline continued. You have asked whether I intend to marry again, whether my son needs a father figure, whether the Frost name requires a man beside it to remain stable. A few people shifted, embarrassed to hear their whispers made elegant. Adeline looked out over them. My answer is the same tonight as it has been from the beginning. If I ever marry again, it will not be because a board finds it reassuring. It will not be because donors prefer symmetry. It will not be because a man believes patience entitles him to proximity. Victor's face remained pleasant. Only his eyes hardened. Adeline placed her hand gently over Sam's. I will only marry again if my son chooses the man himself. The room exhaled. There it was, the famous promise, the impossible condition, the beautiful defense. Then Victor began to clap. Others followed, soft at first, then rising. It sounded supportive. It was not. Adeline knew applause could be a cage when given by people who misunderstood the sentence. Victor stepped forward as if to join her on stage. That was when Sam let go. At first, Adeline thought he had pulled away because he was overwhelmed. She turned slightly. Sam? but he was already walking, down the short stage steps, across the polished floor. The applause fractured into silence. Pilar took one step forward, then stopped because something in Sam's posture told her not to interrupt. Adeline's breath disappeared. Sam walked past Victor. Victor extended a hand by instinct, as if the boy were coming to him. Sam did not even look at it. He walked past Graham, past Celeste, past the donors who had sent gifts and cards and carefully phrased sympathy notes, past men who had lowered themselves to his height only when a camera was nearby. He crossed the ballroom with the grave determination of a child who had spent 2 years silent and had finally found the exact thing worth saying. At the back, Theo Marsh saw him coming and went still. Every instinct told him to meet the boy halfway. He did not. Something about this belonged to Sam. So Theo waited. Sam stopped in front of him. The room held its breath. Then the boy reached up and took Theo's hand. Theo's fingers closed around his carefully, not gripping, not claiming, just receiving. Sam turned toward the ballroom. His voice was small, rough from disuse, but clear enough to break every heart in the room. "This is my friend. He sees the dog with me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Adeline made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a breath. Pilar covered her eyes. Margaret Ellis pressed both hands to her chest. Even people who had come to be seen forgot to arrange their faces, because a silent child had spoken. And he had not spoken for the men with gifts. He had spoken for the man who slowed the bus. Someone, near the front, a donor with too much champagne and too little understanding, laughed through tears and called out, "Well, Adeline, it seems your son has chosen." A ripple moved through the room, tender laughter, a few delighted gasps. Then applause began again, bigger this time, emotional and dangerous. Because the room wanted a story it could understand. A billionaire widow, a silent child, a humble school bus driver, a promise fulfilled. The machinery of fantasy started moving immediately. People turned toward Theo with shining eyes. Some smiled as if he had won something. Victor saw it and went white around the mouth. Adeline saw it too. And before she could step down from the stage, Theo moved. He lowered himself in front of Sam, not for the room, for the boy. "Sam," he said quietly, "that was the bravest thing I've ever seen." The applause faded. Theo continued, his voice low enough that people leaned in to hear. "Thank you for telling them we're friends, because we are, and we will always be friends." Sam looked at him with a trust so unguarded it hurt. Theo stood then, still holding Sam's hand. He looked deeply uncomfortable, but he did not look weak. "My name is Theo Marsh," he said. "I drive Route 14 for St. Anselm Preparatory. I was invited here tonight because the school put staff names into a lottery, and mine came out of a bowl." A nervous laugh moved through the room. Theo did not smile. "I don't know most of you. I didn't know until tonight that Sam was Mrs. Frost's son. I know him as the quiet boy in the third row who likes the golden retriever on Maple Street." Adeline's hand went to her heart. Theo's voice steadied. "And I need to say this before anyone turns this child into a headline." The room went silent again. "Your son did not choose a husband for his mother tonight. He chose a friend for himself, and I will not let anyone in this room turn the bravest thing he has ever done into a shortcut to his mother's money." Victor stepped forward. "That is an extraordinary accusation." Theo looked at him. "No, sir, it's a boundary." The word landed harder than an insult. Theo turned back toward Adeline. "Mrs. Frost, your boy is not a key to a lock. He is a child, and tonight he used his voice not to give anyone a prize, but to tell the truth about who made him feel safe." Adeline could not speak. Not immediately. Because Theo had understood in 10 seconds what the room had refused to understand for 2 years. Sam's voice was not a miracle to be harvested. It was a door that had opened from the inside. Victor realized the room was slipping away from him. He stepped into the silence with the instincts of a man who had never allowed a public narrative to move without him. "How moving," he said softly. "Really, very moving." Theo looked at him but said nothing. Victor's smile sharpened. But perhaps we should all be careful before accepting this as innocence. A school employee appears at a major Frost event, waits at the back of the room, and then becomes the center of the most emotionally valuable moment of the evening. Forgive me, but I find that remarkably convenient. A murmur passed through the guests. There it was, the counterattack. Not anger, suspicion. Victor turned to Adeline. Adeline, you of all people understand proximity to wealth attracts performance. Theo's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Adeline stepped down from the stage. Every eye followed her. She crossed to Sam first. Not Theo. Not Victor. Sam. She knelt, disregarding the silk of her gown against the floor. Hi, my love, she whispered. Sam looked at her. Adeline was crying now, but quietly. Thank you for using your voice. Sam's lower lip trembled. She did not ask him to speak again. She did not ask him to explain. She simply kissed his forehead and stood. Then she turned to Victor Hale. The room felt the temperature change. Do not, she said softly, use my intelligence as a costume for your jealousy. Victor's eyes flickered. Adeline. You implied Mr. Marsh manipulated my son because that is what you would have done if you had been in his position. Several people looked away. Victor's face hardened. I have done nothing but support your family. No, Adeline said. You have supported the appearance of supporting my family. Graham moved forward. Adeline, perhaps this conversation should happen privately. She did not look at him. It became public when you helped place my private boundary on a stage. Graham froze. Adeline turned toward Margaret Ellis. Mrs. Ellis, was Mr. Marsh selected by lottery? Margaret stepped forward, pale but composed. Yes, his name was drawn with 2 other staff representatives. He was not given any special access. He was not seated with the Frost family. He came through the staff entrance. Adeline looked at Pilar. Did Mr. Marsh ever ask you about me? Pilar's voice was steady. Never. He did not know who you were to Sam. Did he ever ask about our home, our family, our schedule? No. Did he ever send gifts? No. Did he ever ask Sam to speak? Pilar looked at Theo, then at Sam. No. He only greeted him every morning, and he slowed the bus near Maple Street so Sam could see the dog. A soft sound moved through the ballroom. Not applause, recognition. The kind that makes people ashamed of what they praised too quickly. Victor tried to laugh. So now a traffic delay is nobility? Theo finally answered. No, it's just kindness. That's why it confused you. The line cut cleanly. A few guests gasped. Adeline almost smiled, not because it was funny, because it was true. Victor's expression emptied of charm. You are very confident for a man who parks buses for a living. Theo looked at him for a long second. I'm confident because I know why I'm here. Do you? Victor's face tightened. For a moment, it looked as if he might walk away. Instead, pride made the decision for him. He turned sharply toward the stage and reached for the microphone, as though the room still belonged to him if only he could speak louder than the truth. But Margaret Ellis stepped in front of him. Not aggressively. Worse. Calmly. Mr. Hale, she said, her voice carrying through the ballroom. This stage is for the children's initiative, not for men who mistook a child for access. The silence that followed was devastating. Victor's hand remained suspended in the air, inches from the microphone. No one helped him. No one laughed. No one rescued the moment. For the first time that evening, Victor Hale looked exactly like what he was. Not powerful, not protective, not paternal, exposed. Adeline watched the room turn away from him in real time. That was the thing about elite society. It could forgive cruelty if it stayed useful. It could forgive ambition if it stayed elegant. But it rarely forgave embarrassment. And Victor had just become embarrassing. Adeline took the silver-wrapped box from where it had been placed on a nearby table. She held it up. Victor brought my son another gift tonight. He swallowed. I was trying to be thoughtful. She looked at the photographer stationed near the floral arch. And the photographer? Victor said nothing. Adeline handed the box to Graham. Open it. Graham hesitated. Adeline, open it. He removed the paper. Inside was a rare collector's watch, child-sized, engraved on the back. For Samuel, time heals when the right people stay. The sentence was tasteful enough to be printed, grotesque enough to be true. Adeline's voice did not rise. You engraved a message about healing on a luxury watch for a 6-year-old child who does not know you. Victor's mouth tightened. You're making this ugly. No, Adeline said. You made it useful. Ugly was already there. She turned to the room. This foundation exists to protect children from being reduced to their trauma. Tonight, my son was almost reduced to mine. No one moved. So let me be clear. Samuel Frost is not a test men can pass to reach me. He is not a symbol. He is not a public relations strategy. He is not a succession plan. He is a child. Her eyes moved to Graham. And any trustee, advisor, donor, or guest who cannot understand that will no longer have access to this foundation. Graham's face drained. Victor's did not. His pride would not allow it. This is emotional overcorrection, he said. Adeline looked at him with something colder than anger. No, Victor, this is governance. That word changed everything. Because in rooms like that, emotion could be dismissed. Governance could not. Adeline turned to the Foundation's general counsel, who stood near the second row. Tomorrow morning, I want a review of all advisory access granted to non-trustees in the last 12 months. Start with Mr. Hale. Freeze all pending proposals involving Hale Strategic Capital until the review is complete. Victor stared. You cannot be serious. I rarely joke about conflicts of interest. This is retaliation. No, Adeline said. This is the consequence of trying to turn my child into leverage. The room did not applaud. It did something worse for Victor. It recalculated. Donors who had leaned toward him leaned away. Trustees who had entertained his usefulness began imagining emails, memos, questions. Graham Whitlock looked suddenly old. Celeste Ward looked ashamed. And Theo Marsh, who could have been the center of the fantasy, used the moment to step out of it. He bent toward Sam. Your mom's got you, he said softly. Sam tightened his grip. Theo did not pull away. He simply waited until Sam was ready. Then Sam let go. Adeline took her son's hand. This time, Sam held on with all 5 fingers. The gala did not recover. It continued, because expensive events always continue. Dessert was served. Pledges were collected. The string quartet resumed with doomed professionalism. But the mood had changed. Victor left before the final remarks. Not dramatically. That would have given Adeline more power. He left through the side corridor, phone already at his ear, trying to control damage before the room finished naming it. By midnight, 3 donors had privately asked Adeline whether Hale Strategic Capital had any formal role in the foundation. By morning, 2 trustees requested copies of conflict policies. By Monday, Graham Whitlock offered to step back temporarily from foundation governance. Adeline accepted permanently. Victor was not exposed as a criminal. That would have been simpler. He was exposed as something more socially fatal in his world. A man who misread a grieving child as an opportunity. In certain rooms, that kind of ugliness could be forgiven if it made money, but it could not be forgiven once it became embarrassing. And Victor Hale had become embarrassing. 3 days after the gala, Adeline Frost went to Maple Street alone. No driver, no assistant, no black car. She wore dark trousers, a camel coat, and sunglasses she did not need. She parked 2 blocks away because she did not want Theo to see a billionaire arriving like an institution. The golden retriever was in the yard. He ran to the fence as if greeting history. Adeline stood on the sidewalk and looked at him. So you're the dog, she said. The dog wagged his tail. A woman pruning roses near the porch looked over. That's Maple, she called. Adeline almost laughed. Of course it is. At 3:41, the school bus turned the corner. Adeline felt nervous in a way boardrooms never made her feel. The bus slowed near the house. Maple ran along the fence. Through the window, Adeline saw Sam in the 3rd row. He saw the dog. Then he saw her. His eyes widened. The bus stopped at the corner. Children began climbing down. Theo stepped off last, clipboard in hand, and froze when he saw her. Mrs. Frost. Mr. Marsh. He looked immediately toward the bus, then toward the children, making sure nothing about her presence unsettled the routine. That small glance told Adeline more about him than any background check would have. "I'm not here to disrupt your route," she said. "Good," Theo replied, "because 7 parents would call dispatch before I reach the next block." She smiled despite herself. Sam came down the steps slowly. Pilar waited at the usual stop, watching with careful interest. Adeline crouched. "Hi, sweetheart." Sam looked from her to Theo to Maple. Then he pointed at the dog. Adeline nodded. "I see him." Sam studied her face, as if deciding whether she truly did. Theo stood a respectful distance away. Adeline rose. "I came to say thank you." Theo's expression closed slightly. "You don't need to thank me." "I do." "No, Mrs. Frost. You need to let Sam keep whatever that was without turning it into a debt." The words could have sounded rude. They did not. They sounded protective. Adeline accepted the correction. "You're right." Theo looked surprised. She continued. "Then I'll say this differently. Thank you for not taking what everyone in that room expected you to take." Theo glanced down. "I wouldn't know what to do with what they thought I'd won. Most men would learn quickly. I'm not most men." "No," Adeline said. "I noticed." Silence settled between them. Not romantic, not yet. Something more careful. Respect. Theo looked at Sam. "He okay after the gala?" Adeline's throat tightened. "He said 4 words yesterday." Theo's face softened. "What were they?" She smiled through the ache. "He asked if Maple was real." Theo looked toward the dog. "Fair question. He does look professionally happy." A sound came from Sam. Small, unexpected, not quite a laugh, but close enough that Adeline had to look away. Theo pretended not to notice. That was when she understood the depth of his kindness. He did not grab at miracles. He let them breathe. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. That mattered. Adeline did not invite Theo to dinner the next day. Theo did not suddenly enter the Frost townhouse as a romantic hero. Sam did not wake up, cured. Healing did not behave like a press release. There were good days and silent days. Days when Sam answered with 1 word, and days when language retreated again. Days when Adeline's hope made her impatient, and she had to apologize to a 6-year-old for wanting too much too quickly. But something had shifted. Sam began speaking on the bus. Not often, not loudly, but enough. One morning, as Theo slowed near Maple Street, Sam said, "He has a blue ball." Theo kept his eyes on the road. "Good color. Yellow is better. I respect your position." 2 seats behind him, Lily Marsh turned around. "Yellow is not better than blue." Sam looked at her. Lily had recently joined the same school on a partial staff scholarship after Margaret Ellis discovered she was reading 2 grade levels ahead and emotionally negotiating like a tiny union lawyer. She had Theo's eyes and none of his restraint. "Yellow is louder," Sam said. Lily considered this. "That's true." Theo gripped the steering wheel and said nothing, because if he reacted, the moment might disappear. That afternoon, Lily came home and announced, "The quiet boy is not actually quiet. He is just selective with his audience." Theo nearly dropped a saucepan. "Is that so?" "Yes. Also, his dog is not his dog. Maple belongs to the house on Maple Street. That's confusing branding." Theo laughed. Slowly, the families began touching at the edges. A school picnic, a foundation reading day, a parent volunteer morning where Adeline arrived in jeans and still somehow made every other adult stand straighter. Theo did not approach her unless there was a reason. Adeline appreciated that until she realized she sometimes wanted him to. Their first real conversation happened in the school library after a storm canceled outdoor pickup. Children sat on rugs with books while parents and staff negotiated umbrellas, traffic, and wet shoes. Adeline found Theo reshelving picture books near the back. "You don't have to do that," she said. He glanced at the stack in his hand. "I don't know. This dinosaur section was in crisis." She took 2 books and helped. For 3 minutes they worked in silence. Then Adeline said, "I was angry at you after the gala." Theo looked over. "That so?" "Yes." "Because I spoke out of turn?" "No, because you saw it faster than I did." Theo placed a book on the shelf carefully. "I didn't see the whole thing." "You saw enough." She looked toward the children, where Sam and Lily were sitting side by side over a book about weather. "I built the promise to protect him," she said, "and then I let them turn it into theater." Theo's voice was gentle. "You didn't let them. They tried. I'm responsible for the stage. You're responsible for your son. From what I've seen, you take that seriously." Adeline laughed once, without humor. "People say that when they want me to stop blaming myself. I'm saying it because it's true." She looked at him. Theo did not look away. That was new. Most men looked at Adeline Frost either as a prize, a threat, or a ladder. Theo looked at her like a tired parent standing in a school library with damp hair and a stack of dinosaur books. It was almost unbearable. "Do you ever get tired of being decent?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "All the time." That was the first honest thing that felt like intimacy. Victor tried twice to return to the narrative. First, through a financial magazine profile suggesting emotional governance had begun to affect Frost Meridian's strategic clarity. Adeline responded by giving the magazine exclusive access to the education initiative's expansion numbers, independent audits, and partner outcomes. The story that ran was not about her instability. It was about the most successful philanthropic launch of the year. Then Victor attempted to approach Celeste. He sent flowers after a charity luncheon with a note. Families survive misunderstanding when wise people refuse to let emotion become policy. Celeste sent the flowers back. No note. That hurt him more. By then, the Foundation review had revealed no crime, but plenty of inappropriate access. Draft proposals routed through Graham. Donor conversations implying Victor would soon have a formal advisory role. A planned family stewardship council that Adeline had never approved. Adeline presented the findings at the next board meeting. She did not shout. She did not dramatize. She placed the documents in front of every trustee and said, "This is how reputational capture begins, not with theft, with assumption." Graham resigned before the vote. Victor's pending advisory agreements were terminated. Hale Strategic Capital lost 2 institutional introductions within a month. No scandal headline destroyed him. Something quieter did. People stopped returning calls with the same speed. In his world, that was the beginning of exile. Adeline did not celebrate. She went home after the board meeting, took off her heels in the foyer, and found Sam at the kitchen table with Lily and Theo. Pilar had invited them for an afternoon visit after a school event ran long. Theo stood when Adeline entered. "We were just leaving." Lily looked up from a plate of cookies. "We were not." Theo closed his eyes briefly. "Lily." "What? We weren't." Sam was explaining why rich cookies are too symmetrical. Adeline looked at Sam. "They are," he said. 3 words, casual, unprompted, in his own kitchen. Adeline placed a hand against the wall to steady herself. Theo saw and quietly looked away. Again, he gave her privacy inside her own miracle. That was the moment love began, though neither of them would name it for a long time. A year passed, then another, not in montage, in work. Adeline learned Theo's pride had edges. He did not like accepting gifts. He did not want Lily treated like a charity case. He refused a new car 3 times and looked genuinely offended when Adeline suggested a safer apartment building too early. "I can provide," he told her. "I know," she said. "I wasn't suggesting otherwise." "Yes, you were. Not cruelly, but you were." She had to sit with that. He was right. Love, for Adeline, had become entangled with control. If she could improve something, she wanted to. If she could remove risk, she tried. But Theo did not want to be managed into comfort, so she learned to ask. He learned to receive without hearing insult. Neither lesson came naturally. Sam kept speaking, first to Theo, then to Lily, then to Pilar again, then slowly to Adeline in ways that both healed and hurt. One night, while they were reading in Nolan's old chair, Sam said, "I forgot Daddy's voice." Adeline closed the book. The sentence entered her like a blade. "I know," she whispered. "Did you?" "No. Can you tell me?" So she did. She told him Nolan's voice was warm in the morning and terrible when he tried to sing. She told him he said "spectacular" too often. She told him he laughed before punchlines if he was proud of the joke. Sam listened. Then he said, "I thought if I talked, he would still not answer." Adeline held him until he slept. Later, she called Theo from the hallway. She did not ask him to fix it. She had learned better. She only said, "Today was hard." Theo answered, "I'm here." That was enough. When Adeline and Theo finally married, it was not in a ballroom. There were no society photographers, no donor tables, no board members pretending emotion was governance. They married in a small garden behind a stone chapel upstate, with 23 people, one nervous officiant, and a golden retriever named Maple. Maple did not belong to the house on Maple Street anymore. His elderly owner had moved to be near her grandchildren and asked Sam if he knew a family who understood his importance. Sam had said yes. Maple wore a yellow ribbon. Lily was the flower girl and took the role with executive seriousness. Sam carried the rings and spoke all day. Not because anyone demanded it, because he wanted to. At the reception, Adeline danced once with Theo, once with Sam, once with Lily, and once alone for half a song when the memory of Nolan became too strong to ignore. Theo found her near the garden wall afterward. "You okay?" She looked at the light strung between the trees. "I can be happy and still miss him." "Yes," Theo said. "You're not threatened by that?" "No. He was Sam's father. He was your husband. Love doesn't become less real because life keeps moving." Adeline took his hand. Inside the tent, Sam laughed at something Lily said. A full laugh. Clear. Alive. After the wedding, people expected Theo to stop driving the bus. Some asked politely. Some asked with confusion. A few asked with the faint insult of those who believed work became meaningless once money entered the room. Theo kept his route. Same depot, same coffee, same greeting. "Morning, Sam. Good to see you. There he is. Climb aboard, partner." Only now, when Sam boarded, Lily sometimes saved him a seat. Sometimes they argued about colors. Sometimes they discussed Maple's moral development. Sometimes they said nothing and looked out the window together. One afternoon, a new child climbed onto the bus. Small, silent, clutching a backpack strap like it was holding him upright. Theo recognized the posture before he knew the story. The boy's mother stood on the curb with anxious eyes, ready to explain. Theo gave her the smallest reassuring nod. Then he looked at the child and smiled. "Morning," he said. "Good to see you." The boy did not answer. Theo had not expected him to. He closed the door gently and pulled away from the curb. At Maple Street, he slowed the bus just enough for the golden retriever in the yard to run along the fence. The new boy looked up. Sam noticed. He leaned across the aisle and said quietly, "That's Maple. Theo sees him too." The boy said nothing, but his hand loosened on the backpack strap. And sometimes that is where a voice begins. Not with a demand, not with a miracle, not with a room full of wealthy people waiting to turn a child's courage into a story about themselves, but with one adult who sees what everyone else missed. One extra second at a fence. One dog in the morning light. One ordinary kindness that asks for nothing back. Samuel Frost did not choose Theo Marsh because he was rich, powerful, handsome, or useful. He chose him because Theo never tried to buy his voice, never tried to cure his grief for applause, never treated his silence as a locked door to someone else's fortune. Theo did not win the billionaire chief executive officer by being chosen by her son. He earned her trust by refusing to use the boy who chose him. And in the end, that was the only kind of man Adeline Frost could ever have allowed into her family. Not the man who wanted the room. Not the man who wanted the name. Not the man who wanted the money. The man who saw the dog and slowed down.